Hello everyone. Our industry has obviously been affected greatly by the pandemic, so much so that it has shrunk considerably and has forced massive layoffs and furloughs. Many of our friends, family, and colleagues have lost their jobs, including some of you here today. While I strongly believe in the resilience of our industry, it's a tough road right now, and we at a team will want to do everything we can to help you find your next success. With that in mind, we've enrolled an expert who can help you kickstart your job search. I'd like to introduce Lynée Alves, President and Career Coach from Interview Like an Expert. She'll be reviewing specific tips and best practices for resumes, LinkedIn, career search strategy, and job interviews. You're guaranteed to come away with practical and useful information that you can use at any time. So please enjoy Career Search Success Strategies with Lynée Alves.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm so happy to have you all along to join me for this great session that I'll be presenting on career search success strategies. So thank you to the Hospitality and Tourism Summit. I'm so pleased to be a speaker today, and thank you to Tim O'Malley for inviting me to join all of you today. First, a quick introduction about me. My name is Lynée Alves, and I am president of Interview Like an Expert. I have over 20 years of experience recruiting, interviewing, and hiring top talent at top organizations. I'm also currently featured as CBS2 Chicago's career coach, contributing a weekly segment to their morning news program. And I'm a career coach working with clients on all of the following: job search, career transitions and pivots, interview coaching, resume rewrites, and effectively leveraging LinkedIn. And not just having your profile up to date, but also activities that you can engage in on the platform to support a more successful and productive job search. So with that, let me talk a little bit today about some of the challenges that I know everybody is facing, anybody who is looking for a job. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, I don't need to tell you this, but there has been a huge spike in unemployment, and there are even more people applying for available jobs. There were a lot of people applying pre-COVID, but it has increased obviously significantly. So now you're competing not only with those who are unemployed, which is a large number, but also with people who are currently employed and unhappy in their job. And I work with both of these audiences. Let me also talk to you about what I call the rise of the bots. 98% of Fortune 500 companies and a growing number of small and mid-sized businesses filter resumes through an applicant tracking system. You may have heard of this, applicant tracking system software. And this is before anybody takes a look, if they ever do. So I get questions from clients all the time about their resumes and how are they going to get past the applicant tracking system software. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today in my presentation. But I do want to remind everybody that when you're looking for a job, applying is just the first step. So applying and sending your resume into that system at a company or at a job posting site is the first step. There are other steps that you need to take in order to call attention to your application because of this software. So you have to do some strategic networking to get your application noticed and looked at by a recruiter, an HR manager, or a hiring manager. So the key things to know is the job market is still flooded with candidates, especially with those for more desirable roles. Job searches are taking longer in many cases at any level, but even more so for higher level professional roles because there are fewer of them. Technology is definitely being leveraged at every step of the way. On your end, if you're an applicant with online applications and the software that's scanning your resume, with LinkedIn, with video interviews and more. And the truth is that the job search process has changed significantly over the past several years and can really be overwhelming to job seekers at every level, and especially overwhelming to those who haven't been in the active job market for a while, who haven't had to apply in a traditional, sense in many years. So today I'm hoping to at least give you a great overview of everything you need to know if you are applying for a new job and searching for a new job. So today's agenda will be for me to go through some job search strategies and share those with you, how you can have a more effective and efficient job search. I've got a great tool that a lot of people don't know about. Resume tips and best practices. I also want to talk about career pivots. If you're thinking about a career pivot, and I know many people in the hospitality and tourism industries are considering this, what do you need to know? I also want to talk about the importance of LinkedIn and how to use it effectively, interviewing tips and best practices, and mindset strategies as you're navigating all of this. We're going to do this in a little bit of a different order. The career pivot piece is actually a little bit more toward the end, because I think it gets led into by some of this other information better. So first, let's talk about job search strategies. I want to make sure everybody knows about Google Jobs. Google Jobs is a great resource and a huge time saver for job seekers. Now, when you use Google Job Search, it's going to bring back results from all of the major job search posting sites, including ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, CareerBuilder, and more. Now, the only major job site that I've noticed that is not included in results is Indeed.com. So obviously these sites needed to sign an agreement with Google to bring back their results. Indeed did not participate in that. So if you want to search for jobs on Indeed, you would have to do a separate search. But the good news here is that you could literally, if you know what titles you're looking for and know what types of jobs you're looking for, you could net your search down to looking at 2 sites. You could leverage Google Jobs and Indeed.com, and that would bring you back everything that's out there. So let's take a look together. All you need to do is go to your Google search bar and enter a job title and a location and the word jobs into Google. So like in this case, I didn't enter the word jobs, but let's say you did sales representative jobs, Chicago, Illinois. You really don't have to enter the location if you're in a location and you're okay with getting results that surround where you're at. But if you're looking in a different location, put the location. So it's either put your job title location or just job title jobs and location. So in this example, I just entered sales representative Chicago, Illinois. And you can see that this blue banner box is what I get back. If you look in the lower left where I've got that big old red arrow pointing, you will see that they have a link to over 100 more jobs in addition to the 3 featured jobs they bring back here. So when you click on that link, you go into this window that is going to show you just a laundry list of jobs that have sales representative in the title. Now, I'm not going to be able to go through every bit of navigation on this today, but there are tabs at the top. You can maybe see, if you can't, they say category, title, new to you. That's been changing in and out every time I go into the site. Location, date posted, type of job, company type, and even employers. So if you find a title, a job that you're interested in, you can see which companies are hiring and just look at those postings. It's an amazing search tool, and I highly recommend it to all of my clients, and I wanted to share it with all of you here today. So I hope that's really helpful for you. So moving on, I'd like to talk to you about your resume. Your resume is so important, and this is how many people start their conversation with me as a career coach. They come to me wanting help with their resume because they know what an important tool it is in their job search. So here are some resume best practices that you need to be aware of in today's hiring environment. You want to have an updated and contemporary format and layout, and you want to use a sans serif font. Now, if you're not a graphic designer, you may not know what that means, but I'll show you a couple of examples to illustrate it. So Times New Roman is a serif font. It's got those decorative elements on the end of each letter. And then Calibri is a sans serif font. It does not have serifs, which are those little decorative elements. It's a little bit cleaner as a type font, and it looks a little bit more updated. So it just helps your resume look a little bit more contemporary. So some really important, pieces of information to know about the current resume layout. You want to have a clean header. It's ideal to include your LinkedIn URL so that people know you're on the platform and know how to find you there. You also want to create an engaging professional summary. For those of us like me who started their careers more than 30 years ago, when we started, we had something on our resume called the objective, and that's no longer in current use. The current practice is to have a professional summary. And you also want to call out your key strengths and skills underneath your professional summary. So I'm going to take you through this section by section so you can see what it looks like. So I know there's a lot going on here. Just try and stick with me from top to bottom. The font that I've used here on this sample resume is Calibri. You can kind of see that it's really clean and easy to read. What I didn't put on this particular slide, but I do want to call to your attention, is the fact that I also added a little bit of spacing in between each line. So it's not single spaced, it's like maybe a little bit more than single spaced, just to give it a little bit more of an easy readability for somebody who's going to look at it. So first, let's start at the top. I talked about a clean header and a headline. So you want a very clean layout. Your name should be in big, bold type. This is, something you want people to remember. So definitely highlight it. And then you can see that underneath, you can just have a single line that includes your city and state. You do not need your full address, a phone number, ideally with a professional sounding voicemail message on it. So make sure if you are using your cell phone that you have a recorded message. So if somebody calls you and is expecting to speak with you, they know it's you that they've reached. Your email, and I do recommend that you have a more current email, particularly if you're a more experienced employee. If you have a Hotmail address or an AOL address, that tends to date you. So go ahead and get a new email address on Gmail, on Yahoo. You can even use your internet service provider like a Comcast.net address, but stay away from some of those more dated emails. And then you can see I've got on the end here what I'm calling the LinkedIn vanity URL. It's your custom URL, and I'm actually going to show you how to customize yours if you're not sure how to do that. It looks really clean. So next we get into the professional summary. This is not intended to be an exhaustive summary of your career. It's intended to be, what are your top strengths and skills? What do you love about the work that you do? What makes you stand out from other people and other candidates who may be applying for the same jobs you're applying for? That's what you put together here. And then you can see underneath, I've called out 9 key strengths and skills. It's very clean. This is such a simple and great at a glance view of you as a candidate. And, in the resume world, they say that the most important real estate on your resume is the top, probably half or so of the resume. So that's going to include this section and probably your most recent experience and possibly even the job before that. So it's really important to have these pieces buttoned up and really, in fine form for you to promote yourself as a candidate to potential new employers. So ensure that your professional experience, which is the section we're going to get into next, is clearly written and focuses on your results and your accomplishments that would be of value to a new employer. So what I see a lot is people who might have a resume that describes what they do. What are their job duties? What are their responsibilities? And that's good. We do want that information. Somebody wants to know what that is. They want to know that about you, but they also want to know what are the results and accomplishments that you contributed, because then they can envision you doing those same things for them. And then the dated experience on your resume, if you do have more work experience, only needs to go back between 20 and 25 years. It doesn't mean that you have to eliminate experience older than that on your resume, but you'll put it under a different header without dates. So let's take a look at this professional experience section. So it's optional for you, and again, a lot going on here. I'll go from top to bottom. It's optional for you to do a brief company summary and a brief role summary. Now, I suggest this for people if they're working at a company. In this case, this gentleman was working at a company that wasn't a household name. But if you're in the hospitality industry and you're working for, Hilton or Hyatt or any number of major brand players in the industry, you probably don't need to explain where you work. so you don't have to use this. It doesn't have to take up space on your resume. But if it's not a familiar name, not a familiar business, I do recommend a very, very short overview, 1 to 2 sentences max, of what that company is and does. You can see on the right side as we go down, I only use years. I like this because I think it cleans up your resume and keeps it easy to, again, navigate and at a glance, see when you were where. If you want to keep track, of course, of your months and years for applications that you need to submit to companies, that's fine. But on your resume, you don't need it. And it also helps you to kind of mask career gaps if you have them. So next, moving down underneath the role summary, which I already talked about, which is optional, I want to share with you a couple of examples of accomplishments and results. So in one case, this guy had consolidated some warehouses, and that, as you can see in the first accomplishment, resulted in savings of $535,000 in base rent, insurance, and taxes. Well, that's going to be very appealing to a next employer. Similarly, he was in a warehouse environment where safety is super important, and he achieved an average increase of 10% or greater on safety scores through communication and enforcement of corporate safety policies. There's a lot being said there, not just his results, but also that he's exhibiting good communication, that he's supporting and enforcing corporate policies. These are all important concepts, all worked into one single line. So it's a really great way to represent yourself. The next thing you want to do is create a section after your professional experience for technical skills and proficiencies. Obviously, there's lots of software being used in the workplace these days, even if it's just basic level that you're using like Microsoft Office Suite, or maybe you have a specialty software program that you use in your industry that maybe is used in other industries, maybe like Salesforce.com. You'd want to include that here. And then, as I said earlier, for more experienced candidates, I think that your college graduation date can be removed actually even a little earlier. Once you have about 15 years of work experience under your belt, you can take that off. And this is especially important for those candidates who have more than 20 years of experience, because we don't want to let employers know how old we are. We don't need to tell them that. And if we do, it's possible that you could be the victim of discrimination. So don't let them know how old you are. So here's what these look like. Technical skills and proficiencies. You can see in this case, we've got Microsoft Office Suite plus a couple of others. And then education, you can see I've removed the graduation years. And in this candidate's case, even though the associate in culinary arts was not relevant to the work he was pursuing, he wanted it included in his resume. It's a conversation starter. So now let's move on to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is such a valuable tool for anyone who is actively or passively searching for a job. It's the go-to resource for online professional profiles and for social networking in a business environment. It also features a large database of high-quality job postings, so I do highly recommend it as a place to search for jobs. Even if you're using that Google job search, going on LinkedIn is also really great. You can do a lot of filtering there. And I want you to be aware that recruiters are actively searching for candidates on LinkedIn every single day. Recruiters have a souped up version of LinkedIn called LinkedIn Recruiter, and they can do much more powerful searches than you and I can. So first, let's talk about the little trick I told you about earlier and teased earlier, how you can clean up and personalize your LinkedIn URL. So if you go to your feed, you go under the Me icon, and you can see there's this gray link that says edit public profile and URL. It does not look clickable. It is. Click that link and you will be brought to the same general area on a new page that says edit URL. And at the top here above the graphic that I pulled, you can see what it might have looked like before. It might have said my name at the end with a bunch of random characters, numbers and letters at the end. And that doesn't look very good if you put it on a resume. So all you want to do, if you have those extra characters, which many people still do, is click that blue pencil. You'll be brought to this screen. You just highlight and delete the characters, and then you can choose your first name, last name. But if your first name and last name is real common, like Mike Smith, John Smith, it might not be available. So you might put a dash in between your first and last name, which is actually what I recommend to my clients. I find it to be very readable on the resume. Or you can add a number or a middle at the end or a middle initial, whatever works, but keep it short. That's really the most important thing here. And then you're going to have something that you can put on your resume, and you can even use it in your email signature as you're corresponding with potential employers. The next thing on LinkedIn that you want to focus on is having a compelling headline. In the old days of LinkedIn, your headline was simply the job title that you currently held. And that's still an option. But the other option, which I find much, much better, is to create your own headline that includes your job title. Maybe it's director of sales of some sort. But then also highlight some of your key strengths and skills, ones that would be really important for a director of sales: revenue growth, team leadership, whatever it might be. You get the idea. So you can kind of see what mine looks like. Actually, this is a little bit of an older version. I've updated mine. I update it somewhat frequently, and I suggest you do too. It's always great to continue to go back to it and refine it. Another important thing on LinkedIn is to fully leverage what is now called your About section. Now, when you go to your profile page, this is all that shows. It's just kind of the first 2 lines. But when you click that See More link underneath, this is the amount of space that you have. And actually, they've added some character count to it since I have done this presentation. And frankly, I couldn't fit it all on here. So I left the older version. So you have a lot of runway here to work with. You can write a personal narrative. Again, what makes you unique? What makes you interesting in what you do? Feel free to visit my profile page and take a look at what I've written, and look at other people's as well. And then another little trick I like to note, again, when I talked about the fact that recruiters are on LinkedIn all the time, is making sure you've got keywords in the right places. So your headline is one place where keywords can help you, but don't overdo it. And then here at the bottom of your About section is another area, excuse me, where your keywords can help you. So for my clients, will create a little line that says key strengths and skills, and just do a comma separated, little kind of mini paragraph of keywords that are relevant to the work that they do and the skills that they bring. Another thing I want to highlight that's new over the last several months is this open to job opportunities section. This had gotten changed a little bit recently, in providing services. So if there are job titles you're interested in, input them here and make this visible to anybody on LinkedIn. And similarly, if you have a skill set that allows you to provide freelance services, you can also highlight that here on LinkedIn. One of the most important things that I coach my clients on is the importance of regular activity on LinkedIn, especially when you're looking for a job, but frankly, all the time. Activity can include things like making new connections. And ideally, you want to have a network of 500 or more connections. And what I want to remind you of is this doesn't mean that your connections need to be all business related. They can be professional contacts, of course, within your own company, within prior companies, vendors, clients, any of the above, but also friends, family, neighbors, teachers at your school, anybody, your yoga instructor, anybody you know who's on, anybody you know, look them up, see if they're on LinkedIn and connect with them. Build your network, because some employers, some recruiters are looking at your network numbers to see if they are where they would like them to be, because they want to know that they're hiring somebody who brings a good professional network to the table as well. So activity can include that, and also posting content, sharing content, etc. So very important to be active on LinkedIn. The more active you are, the more visible you are on the platform. The other thing I want to highlight for you is reviewing your skills and endorsements. You can leverage keywords here too, and you can include up to 50 skills in the background. Only 3 are going to show on your profile page as a rule, but LinkedIn is going to identify which 3 appear here based on how many endorsements you have for each. But the good news is you can change this. So if you want to highlight 3 specific skill sets that you think are really important, then you can do that. And here's where you can do that. You can go in and edit. You can pin On the left side, you can see I've pinned my top 3 because in my old career, I've reinvented my career, right? I had a 29-year career in media sales, and I've reinvented myself as a career coach based on all of the experience that I had in corporate America as a hiring manager and the success I had as a candidate. So I didn't want my endorsements to be talking about advertising sales, right? I wanted them to be talking about what I do now. So I've actually gone in and changed this. You can also delete ones that are not relevant anymore, and you can reorder by clicking and dragging within each section. And another great thing to do on LinkedIn is ask for recommendations. I do this all the time but I certainly did it before in my corporate jobs. Regularly, when I changed jobs or even when I was in jobs, occasionally I would ask people for recommendations. Will you recommend my work? And over the years, this has proven to be such a benefit. If you're looking for a job, I do recommend that you have at least, really ideally, 2 more current recommendations. So for example, if you have a recommendation on your profile, that's great. But if it's from 2010, maybe you want to get a couple of updated recommendations from people, and everybody's going to know at least a couple of people who will be happy to write them a really positive recommendation that they can use in their job search. So definitely leverage this as well. All right, so now I'd like to move on to interviewing tips. I love this. My company is called Interview Like an Expert. I absolutely love doing interview coaching. So let's talk about what we do to prepare for an interview effectively. I know this may seem very obvious to many of you, but some people maybe not. Always make time. If you're getting an interview, if you've gotten an interview, to visit the company website. Review just the general information, the focus areas of the business, learn a little bit about it. And then try and think about how would the role you're applying for help support their business strategies. This will enable you, if you do this, to reference some relevant information about the company during an interview. And it will also potentially help you develop a couple of good questions that you might want to ask during your interview. Another piece of interview prep is review the job description or posting. So as you're applying for jobs, I do recommend, especially for those where you feel like you're a really solid fit, make sure you make a copy of those. Copy that text, pop it into a document, throw it in a Google Doc, and just keep track of those, because if you get an interview, sometimes those postings are no longer live online. They're hard to find. And it's a really important thing to reference, and a handy thing to reference if you're prepping for an interview, because you can see what are the key skills that they said they were most interested in? What are some of the things, the keywords, the key phrases I'm going to want to try and reference when I'm having my interview conversation? And then for those who I work with, I know I do a lot of resume rewrites for people. I'm a big proponent of the resume. And if your resume is really well written, you can actually study your resume as interview preparation, because as I mentioned earlier, your resume should have all of your results and accomplishments, kind of your top results and accomplishments that you want to highlight to an employer. And it's absolutely okay to reinforce those and talk about them during your interview. So study your resume so those things are top of mind for you when you have an interview conversation. So let's talk about the interview process these days. I mean, typically an interview will start with a phone screen. These days it might actually go with a video screen right away. But primarily for a while, it was really a phone screen would be that first step in the process. And it was handled by a recruiter. It could be an internal company recruiter, a contract recruiter, or a member of HR. And sometimes a more junior level person, right, is just kind of doing that screening interview to see, hey, you know, what do you sound like? And do you seem like you'd be a fit? And your goal with any interview, starting with a screening interview, is simple. Just advance to the next step. I get a lot of people who sometimes get ahead of themselves and they're already thinking about a job offer before they've even had that first interview. So just know that when you go into a screening interview, your only goal is to get to the next level interview, right? So don't overdo it. Create a cheat sheet of your top strengths and skills. If it's by phone, it's great, right? They can't see you when you're talking to them, so you can have some notes in front of you to reference. And reference some, work successes. Like I said, from your resume, you probably have those top of mind. Remember to keep your answers brief and to the point. Typically a screening interview is no longer than 20 to 30 minutes. So just be very mindful of that. So you should have very clear, succinct answers. Your answers shouldn't go much more than 30 seconds. You have to be really tight with the information that you provide to somebody, because remember, when somebody's listening to you, it's a lot to ingest. If they want more information, you can give them more. I mean, you don't want to be brief and staccato and give them a one-word answer, but you do want to give them an answer that's short and complete, but has some information in it that's compelling. And most importantly, you want to convey positivity, engagement, energy, and likability. Recruiters and employers are always looking for these things during an initial call. It's absolutely going to be a factor in potentially getting to that next step. So I want to talk about soft skills. Some of you may have heard this term, some of you may not have heard this term, but soft skills are so much more important in the workplace these days. And soft skills are basically these characteristics that are about teamwork and attitude, communication, right? It's not the skills of, do I know how to do my job? Do I know how to build that spreadsheet and analyze that data? It's much more about what kind of a person am I to work with, right? So you can see here, am I going to be a creative thinker? Am I going to be a good problem solver? Am I going to be able to, engage in conflict resolution? Am I engaging? Talked about that a moment ago. And communication is really important. And going back to what I mentioned a moment ago about your answers to interview questions, if you go on in an interview, people are paying attention to how are you communicating in an interview, because that might be how you're going to communicate in the workplace. So people could be thinking, boy, I asked this one question, they went off on a lengthy answer that wasn't maybe even part of what I asked. How are they going to behave in a meeting? Are they going to be a productive member of our team? So just know that your answers are not just, your experience is not the only thing an employer is looking for. They're looking for, how do you position it? How can you speak about it? And how are you going to engage in all of these really important areas too? These are all little hints that they're getting as they do an interview with you. So here's some tips for success when you're interviewing. If you're nervous, or if you've not interviewed in a while, one of the most important things you can do is practice. You can get interview questions online and prepare your answers in writing, and then read them and practice them out loud. That is so important, out loud, because when you say your answers, you will be much more comfortable, and you will be, have kind of some muscle memory around these words and phrases that you want to use and that you've practiced. Really try to get as many interviews as you can, which is obviously very difficult these days because of the glut of candidates in the market. If you can get them, even if it's not for an ideal role, it's great practice. But I really, encourage, again, all the people I work with to practice so much. I've written an interview Q&A prep guide where I do mock interviews, and I give people tips on this, but then I provide this guide for them to study. And it is so helpful as you prepare for an interview. I want you to think of it like being in school again. If you had a test, you needed to study for it, and an interview is no different. It's really like a test you need to study for. If you want to do really well, you need to practice, you need to study. Another technique you can use during an interview is something that's called mirroring. And I learned about this when I took classes at Second City many years ago, and it's kind of a common acting technique. Mirroring is, not just kind of physically mirroring somebody, but for example, if I, who am more high energy, go to meet with somebody who might be a little bit more subdued in how they speak, maybe in the pace that they speak, I'm going to slow myself down to match their pace. I don't want to make that person uncomfortable, so I'm going to try and mirror them as best I can. And make sure when you're interviewing that you're always listening. Listen to the question that's asked of you, and make sure you answer it. Don't answer a question you're not asked. Don't expand beyond the question. Pay attention to the question, ask and answer what they're asking. Be sure you speak clearly, and your pace, like I said, is not too fast or too slow. And of course, you do want to be yourself. It's okay to try and relax a little bit into it. You want to actually, so that you can be yourself and present your best self and connect with that person you're interviewing with. All right, so let's talk a little bit about something that I think is of great interest to this audience. I've talked to some people in the hospitality and tourism sectors, and there are a lot of people who are thinking, I need to move out of this area because I'm concerned about the health of this industry for the near term. I'm kind of worried that it's just not going to be a great place for me to be. So I'd like to talk to you, and whether or not this is, what you're thinking of, many people think of career pivots. I'm not happy in what I'm doing right now. It doesn't need to be about the health of the industry. It can be simply, I just don't want to do what I'm doing anymore. So how can I make a career pivot, or can I make a career pivot? So let's talk about what you need to consider if you do want to explore a career pivot. The first thing I guide people to do is take an objective look at your professional experience and do your best to identify your skills and your strengths that are most transferable. And if you don't know if this is something that you can do well on your own, ask somebody who you think would be really helpful with this exercise to help you. So for example, if you're in hotel room sales, your sales skills would be transferable to a new sales role. Now, the key is in the positioning, right? Making sure that you're positioning your experience, positioning your results and your accomplishments to be appealing to other business categories, right? So that we don't use perhaps like a lot of jargon from the hotel industry. I was just looking at, like RevPAR, right? I was just looking at a resume for somebody the other day. And I said, that's probably something you don't want to talk about if you're actually looking to move beyond this. We can talk about it in more common terms, for example. If you're managing or working in events, you can explore event planning companies or corporate event and marketing roles. I know that these jobs in general, again, events have been absolutely impacted, but are starting to come back now. But there are companies that specialize in this, right? And then corporate marketing roles. In my last corporate job, our marketing team members not only worked on marketing collateral and supporting the sales team and other departments, but they also coordinated all of our major events. So there are opportunities to transfer your skills into a different arena that way. The other thing I want to encourage, though, for people is to pay attention and consider the titles and the key responsibilities for each job that you're considering if you're looking into a career pivot. Your easiest and fastest path to a new job is always going to be to pursue roles with similar titles. But you can also search for roles with related or different titles to get a feel for job requirements where your skills could be a fit. So this has been an interesting experience for me in my role. For example, I had a client out in California who had said to me, and he'd been in sales and been in like equipment sales, selling some pretty big pieces of equipment or leasing big pieces of equipment to companies who had, warehouse or manufacturing spaces. And he'd had great success there. And he came to me, and as we were working through his resume and talking about his job search, he said, I saw this posting for a human resources job I thought would be really interesting. And I had to explain to him that human resources roles, for example, typically require a certification in HR. They also typically, at his level, in his experience level, he was in his 50s, would be requiring that you had actual experience in that field in order to be considered for a job. So I want to highlight to you all something that I tell all of my clients all the time. You know, you have your perspective as a candidate, which is I'd be happy to do any number of jobs. I'd really be happy to explore something different, and I'm happy to learn it. But you have to view everything also from an employer perspective. The employer, if they can find talent that has the skills and experience that they want, they are going to be much less likely to consider people who don't bring those skills and experience. And so that's just kind of how it goes. And that's okay. It's not bad. It just means that you have to be practical and aware of what are those requirements and where might I be a fit and where might I not be a fit. We don't want to apply for jobs where we're not a fit, where we don't have the qualifications, because then you just will not have a successful and productive job search, and that will be frustrating. So I don't want anybody to frustrate themselves. I always want people to really focus on the activities that they can do that are going to help them fast track to their goal, which is to get a new job. The other thing I want to highlight for people who are considering a career pivot is you can start your own business in whatever discipline you have experience in, or coaching people like I do, right? In something that you've got experience in, or something that you have expertise in that's outside of your day job. Maybe you're a master gardener, I don't know, right? And it's something that you could explore as a career. You know, just to highlight my own experience, I worked for 29 years in corporate America, and 20 of those years, as I mentioned earlier, were spent in roles where I was a hiring manager and actively recruiting and interviewing people. And I actually had the title of recruiting manager for about a year and a half, in a role where I was in charge of making sure we had our jobs filled for a 100-member outside sales force. And that was the beginning of my experience with recruiting. And that's where I wrote these interview questions that I still use to this day and that are in my guide. And so when I came to the end of my corporate career and just thought, I just don't want to do the same thing I've been doing anymore, what are some skills that I have from my job or in other areas of my life that might be ones that I could use in starting my own business? So I was able to identify those, for example. So I like to just give you guys real life examples so that you know exactly what that might look like, what that might sound like. And like I said, there's so many things that people do in their personal lives that they are expert level at. The coaching industry in general is so huge. Like, who knows, if you were a master at whatever you did or do in your current role, that maybe you are wanting to make a pivot, can you help other people who are in that role and coach them effectively to do what you did so successfully? So many different ways that you can look at this as you explore career pivot. And I love exploring this with people. This is one of my favorite things to do because anything is possible. But you do have to be rooted in reality. I also explored a job at one point toward the end of my corporate career in financial wealth management, which I think I would have been good at. But the reality of that job and starting that job at that point in my life, financially and for a lot of other reasons, just didn't make sense. And I had to kind of recognize that might not be the best fit. So lots of things to talk about here. I love talking about this individually, but I wanted to give you a few real life examples to just illustrate my point. And the last thing I want to say about career pivots is I don't want you to forget about networking. And many people don't like the word networking. I know it all. Think of it as connecting. Networking and connecting with others offers you a great opportunity to talk about your situation and your skills. You know, and you can talk with anybody. You literally never know who might connect you to your next job. I'm going to talk for a moment and share with you a couple of things about my Facebook group that I have, but I did an interview a few months back with an executive coach, and she and I did a whole 30-minute interview all about networking and connecting. And she told some great stories. You know, she said, you think about those people in your life who are just really, they know everybody, right? They're just natural connectors. But that person may not be somebody who you work side by side with. Maybe they are, but maybe they're not. Maybe it's your banker. Maybe it's your fitness instructor. Maybe it's somebody who works at a local shop, right? It could be literally anybody. And she said that she has, you know, encouraged people to talk about the fact that they're looking for a job, and not in a, you know, in a dejected way, but really to say, you know, in conversation, when the opportunity comes up, bring it up, because you literally never know who might connect you to your next job. And we've got some great stories about that, some great real life stories about that in this interview that you can certainly access if you want to join my group. Now, finally, I want to talk about what I believe is your secret weapon for a successful career search. And actually, it's a secret weapon in life. And that is your mindset. You know, I know these are very tough times for people. And during the height of COVID, I was in my Facebook group talking about this a lot. And really, this gets a lot of people's attention. I mean, mindset has been a struggle for a lot of people through the COVID crisis at its peak and through the ongoing crisis. And the truth is, I believe, and I believe many people believe, as mindset strategies have become more and more, you know, prevalent, more talked about, you attract what you put out into the world. So that means that if you're putting positivity out into the world, that positivity is what you're going to get back. But if you're coming at things from a negative mindset, it's going to be much harder for you to gain positive traction in a job search, for example. In addition, the way that you speak to yourself matters, right? We hear a lot these days about more and more, right? Because we talk more about mental health and we hear about negative self-talk. And that is something that many people engage in. It's maybe a learned behavior from their childhoods or whatever, but the way you speak to yourself absolutely matters. And I believe it absolutely plays a role in your success, whether it's related to job search, whether it's related to the current job you're in, whether it's related to your personal life. This affects you, right? And learning how to manage your mindset is a really important tool. I think it's so important for candidates to continue to go back and remind yourself, even in the face of feeling like, gosh, I'm not hearing back from employers. Gosh, I'm not getting the kind of traction I used to get when I applied for jobs years ago. You need to remind yourself of your strengths and what you know, right? I have these strengths, and be confident in your positioning of yourself and your experience. If you can continue to kind of reset yourself when you feel yourself kind of spiraling down a little bit, that will help you. That might mean taking a break. That might mean talking to somebody who can lift you up. And I can also tell you that there are some great tools that you can use and that I recommend to my clients, including meditation, which again is growing in popularity. The two apps that are the most popular and well-known are Headspace and Calm. They both have free meditations available right now because of the COVID crisis, so you don't even have to pay. If you do want to pay though, I've used Headspace and I loved the way they took me through learning about the practice of meditation and teaching me about how it works, because I didn't understand it myself. And now that I have gained an understanding of it, it has proven to be such an amazing tool that I can draw upon in my life day to day. The other thing that you can use is affirmations. Affirmations are another great resource and tool for you. So there are lots of ways to keep your mindset where you need it to be. And it's so important in a job search because it is so easy to feel frustrated and to feel like you're not making progress. But I promise you, if you continue to do the work consistently, you will make progress. All of that momentum that you are creating and developing and building will pay off. So as I close here, I wanted to just point you to a few resources that I have for all of you and for many other people. The first is my free Facebook group. It's called Interview Like an Expert Career Resources. And I've got lots of videos that I've posted there, links to other helpful resources, a big community of people now. It's about 500 strong. And I talked about earlier some of these interviews that I've done. I've done an interview with an executive recruiter, so you can learn all about the world of recruiting and how that works related to your job search. Talked about the executive coach. I've also talked to some people about mindset strategies and how that relates to what we do. And I recently did an interview with a woman who was laid off at the height of the COVID crisis and who found her next new job in about 3 months. And she's very advanced in her career, in her early 60s. She was an amazing interview. So I invite you to join that group if any of that sounds of interest to you. Just look up the group and fill out a couple of questions, and you'll get access to all of that great information. I also have a group coaching program. It's called the Job Search Success Society. If you want to look into that, here's an address for you. And this is a great option for people who are on a budget, maybe who want access to a professional career coach, and to all of the amazing resources that we have loaded into our member portal. So I do a 1-hour coaching session every single week with the group members and focus on different topics in depth and take your questions. So it's really a great forum for people who want to get involved in this and want some access to a career coach. But if you really want to go all in, there's all sorts of coaching services, career coaching services that I provide and that many people come to me for already, like resume rewrites and LinkedIn profile overhauls, job search strategies and career guidance if you're engaged in or trying to engage in a career pivot. Interview coaching and resources, I talked about that earlier. And then I even have all-inclusive one-on-one career coaching programs that include all of these things in a program for individuals who are interested in that as well. So with that, I would love to hear from any of you. I want to thank you for joining me here today. You've got my website here, my email, and you certainly can connect with me and check me out on LinkedIn. And with that, I want to thank all of you for joining me here today. I hope that this overview of all of the things that I know and want to share with you on having a successful career search have been really helpful. I want to again thank Atima, and I want to thank Tim O'Malley and everybody else who has helped put this online conference together. I hope you enjoy the rest of it. Thank you so much.